Welcome, Luz. Thank you so much, hermana, for being here.
My pleasure.
You and I spoke about, this topic we're about to discuss, and I feel like it's very important. And I want to thank you so much from the bottom of my heart for being vulnerable enough and courageous to put this story out there because today's topic is very controversial to some people and
Hmm.
it's very emotional and sensitive. So I appreciate that. But you and I both know that there are many women who don't talk about this, who have been through similar experiences as yours. So, but I'll let you go ahead and tell us a little bit about you and who you are and what your story is about.
Thank you, Dali. First of all, because I'm at a point in my life that I'm glad I'm alive. I'm 50 years old, and I want to share these stories. And so I've met you through Latina Meetup, and we kind of like bonded. And I feel that me sharing this story, you're the person to do that because I trust you with this story. But I'm an educator, been an educator more than 26 years. I've been married for 24. I had to think about that because it's 1997. Um, have two kids and Boricua. Um, and I am totally at this point in my life. I want to share stories. I want to encourage women of all ages, younger women, and also because I wish younger me knew some of these stories.
Thank you.
Dali, I want to share a story with you about redemption. Redemption. Okay. So the year was 1994. And I had graduated from college in 1992. I was studying in Pittsburgh, and then I moved to Philadelphia. And I went to Philadelphia to do my master's degree in bilingual education at LaSalle University. And I went there with my aunt. Well, my aunt lived in Philadelphia, but I went to go stay with her. And while I was there, I met this handsome man, gorgeous Puerto Rican man. Um, and we had a romance, a relationship. And I'm going to stop there because the reason why I tell you this, that I'm going to stop, just keep that in mind. My parents, I am my father's youngest child. So he has two girls and a boy. He had from a previous marriage, and then he met my mom, and I'm their child. So I'm the youngest one, and there's a 10-year gap between my brother and I, because he's the youngest one of my dad's first marriage. Um, and along and they my parents came from big families. My father, his mom, married a widower, and he had a whole bunch of kids. And then my grandmother, his mother, had two boys. Okay, my dad was the oldest. And so, there's a lot of, saben, ¿qué dirán la gente? You got to go to school, tú tienes que hacer esto. All right. Then my mom, she is the youngest of, in her mother and father's relationship, and they got divorced. And then he went on to have another marriage and some kids. And then my grandmother did not have, didn't get married, but she had a few romances, and out of that came like three more kids.
Okay.
So the reason why I give you this context, because being that they were from Puerto Rican families living in, my father was in New York, a Hell's Kitchen in Brooklyn, New York, and then my mom was in Philadelphia, North Philadelphia. Um, they had to work hard, and they school was a priority. My mom was not allowed to date. So, ay, ¿qué van a decir una nena tan propia? Eso no se hace, que es cierto. You don't do those things.
Yeah.
And education was very important, but she didn't get to pursue her education, as finish her college education. And she was in Philadelphia. And so I tell you this because my parents sent me to college, a private college in Pittsburgh, where I got my bachelor's degree. And then I moved to Philadelphia with my aunt, and my mom grew up in Philadelphia. And I also went LaSalle's a private college. And so, ay, que la nena, tú sabes, oh my gosh, she's doing so good. Y mira esto, she has her own place. And my mom calls me Mariel because my second name is Mariel. So it's Luz Nazario. She was like, Mari, you have all these opportunities. Mira esta oportunidad. Ay, mama, make the best of it. You have a job. Mira eso, una mujer independiente de su casa. But I had moved out, right? So I got my own place. I got a job. I was going to school. And she's like, ay, ¿y tienes novio? And then, I was telling her about my husband. Okay, so I met him in Philadelphia, and he's from Puerto Rico as well. So, mommy and daddy were always talking, ay, que si la nena esto, look how great she's doing. All right. Now remember that. Okay. All right.
Got it.
And I tell you this because I'm sure you can relate and some of your viewers can, because, que dirán, I have to act right, and then the whole issue of purity and tú sabes, eres una señorita. You have to go to your marriage una señorita, right? And God forbid.
Yeah.
Y si lo hiciste, nadie quiere saber tampoco. Te vas a vestir de blanco, right? We won't tell anybody, right? Okay. So at this time, I am living with my boyfriend, who is now my husband, and I end up getting pregnant. I was like, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God, ¿qué yo voy a hacer? What am I gonna do? I'm pregnant. I have my own place. I'm paying for, pero mommy's gonna be so upset. And so I didn't know what to do. Mind you, that at that time, my aunt was and still remains a community activist in Philadelphia. She professes herself to be a feminist, and she's like, ¿Qué te pasa? I know something. I noticed you kind of weird. What's going on with you? They're like, oh, nothing. She's like, ¿Qué te pasa? And the funny thing is that the day before, because I worked part time at night at the university at LaSalle, because I got partial discount. And one of the professors looked at me. She says, "Tú estás embarazada. You're pregnant." I had not told anybody, and I'm like, "What are you talking about? What are you talking about, Willis? No, 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 no. I'm just gaining some weight because I'm studying a lot. I'm hungry. Got to stay awake late." So in my head, I'm like, "Oh my God." So my aunt asks me, and I told her, nada, Titi. Algo te pasa, algo te pasa, algo te pasa. Then my day job was with a nonprofit organization called Congresos de Latinos Unidos in Philadelphia, and we did community outreach with the neighborhood kids, kids at risk. And the secretary, she, and it's really weird because I don't know why I confided in her. Not that she went and said anything, but I guess because I knew her history, I said, "Oh my God, I'm pregnant." I said, "What are you going to do, girl?" I said, "I don't know. My mom's going to kill me." And she said, "Well, you going to have the baby or you going to have an abortion?" I said, "I don't know. I know I can't have the kid and I'm afraid to have an abortion." And then all I could think about, what would my mom say? I'd be such a disappointment to my mom, to my parents that were so proud of me. And I was like, oh my gosh, I can't. I can't have a kid. And so I had shared it with my boyfriend, and he was like, no, we'll make this work. And I was like, no, you don't understand. I cannot. I cannot. I can't. It's going to ruin everything. It's going to ruin I just could not. I was like, ¿qué dirán? De verdad, ¿qué van a decir? Mira, que si esto, mira, esta nena se fue. Ya tú sabes, right? Las lenguas iban a correr.
Mhm.
Um, so we had, an argument about that. And, he's like, no, I want you to have the baby. And I was like, I can't. No, I'm not going to have the baby. And so we were going back and forth. We were arguing. And so then going to my aunt, she looks at me. She says, are you okay? And so finally I tell her. And she's like, oh my God, mira para allá. And so then she says, what are you going to do? And at that time, I did volunteer services at Planned Parenthood with community outreach. And I said, I think I'm going to have an abortion. And she's like, well, you sure that's what you want to do? And I was like, Titi, I can't. Yo no puedo hacer esto. Mommy would be so embarrassed. Daddy would be so upset. Con qué cara? Right? And she says, well, do you need help with, do you have money? And I said, no, because I didn't want that to then be like, oh, remember the time that I paid for you and did that?
Yeah.
I didn't want that. So I scheduled an exam, and I went to the exam, and they kept telling me, are you sure? They explained what's going to happen. They did an exam. Um, what I don't remember is, and I want to say they did, but I can't recall if they did, like, is it ultrasound or sonogram where you can hear the heartbeat?
Ultrasound.
Okay.
Oh no, no, I think it is sonogram because of the sound.
Okay. And I was set in my head. No, we're doing this. And they're like, well, are you using any protection? Because you have to take care of yourself. You can't, this is a big step. And the counselors kept, so when people tell me this story, it's like, no, Planned Parenthood, it was pushing. No, my experience was like, you know, they were telling me, this is where the the baby's at. This is what's going on. Are you sure? There's counselors. I was like, no, no, we're not. Because I have a future and I cannot have, no, this was not part of the plan. They're like, are you sure? And I was like, yeah. And so I scheduled it, and my aunt was like, do you want me to go with you? And I was like, no, because I didn't want anyone in my family connected
Mhm.
to that. Right. So the secretary at the place that I worked at, she says, if you need anything, let me know. I'll go with you. So I had told my boyfriend at that time, and he was very upset. He says, but who am I to tell you
Mhm.
what to do? I think we can work it out. And he really tried to the last minute. Like, when I get to, I took the train to Center City, and they told me, they had called me, they said, you're going to get off at this stop and you're going to walk, like, I think it was a block, 2 blocks, to the location. Someone will be there. You got to look. I can't remember the color of the shirt, but that person is going to be your escort, because there was protests. There
Yeah.
was protests every Saturday. And so, my boyfriend at the time says, no, no, I'm walking you. I'm walking you. And I remember we went, and then he got to a point and says, no, I'm not walking you to the door.
Wow.
So then I continued with the escort.
Mhm.
And there's protests. It was a little bit scary. I'll be honest with you, but I was like, don't, I was just like, don't say it. Like, don't even look at me. But being that I had this escort, because there were also women that would go for their exams, right? And Planned Parenthood provides other services that women, why they go there. So there was always an escort on. There was not just one, there were several, but they were escorts. And so I remember that it was in, I know this sounds bad, but the way they had it set up was, it was in the basement, right? But what happened is, one of those basements, they had knocked out a wall that opened up into sort of like a courtyard, a subterranean courtyard. So there was light. Okay. So it wasn't completely cavernous.
Yeah.
Okay. Um, I remember, when I've shared this, when I went to therapy or for all of this, some of the other ladies were like, "Oh no, it's cold." No, I didn't feel cold. I felt warm. I don't know. Hasta el día de hoy, I don't know what, if that was just my blood racing,
Mm-hmm.
and but I felt warm,
Mm-hmm.
and I was just like, "Let's do this. Let's do this. Let's do this." And I got dressed. I got into, and I had researched what the exact procedure was going to be like. So I kind of had an idea. All right. There was the doctor and there were two nurses. Okay. So I was not alone at any time. Um, they explained, as they were going through the process, they were explaining everything. I remember that much. I remember, we're doing this and we're doing this, and this is what's next. And the nurse was, she was holding my hand and she's like, "Are you okay?" I said, "Yeah, I'm fine." um so as I remember, there was the one nurse that was comforting me and the other one was helping the doctor. So it was, like I said, it was that experience in itself. When I talk with other people, does not sound, I'm like, okay, I was not by myself,
Mm-hmm.
right? So then after the procedure, and I can't tell you that it wasn't even more than, I want to say 30 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. I mean, when you're in situations like that, time like does weird things. So
Yeah.
it's just like, I don't know. I know it was in the morning. I had to be there really early. I had to be there super duper early. I remember that. And then afterwards, the nurse that was comforting me, she says, "Okay, listen, this is the procedure's over. You're gonna wear a pad, okay, because you are bleeding." And she said, "And even women that give birth, they bleed afterwards,
Yeah.
right? So you have to wear." And she was explaining, basically your uterus and so forth. And I was like, "Okay." And then she gave me some, I want to say Tylenol, just because that's. But anyway, she says, "This is for the pain, and you're gonna get a prescription um, for pain and also antibiotics." I said,
Can I
"Okay."
ask
Mhm.
what kind of pain were you experiencing?
Um,
Was it more like cramps?
Cramps. Yeah, it was like 10. you
Oh,
know,
yeah.
okay, when we have cramps
Mm-hmm.
and multiply that, I remember that. And then they said, "Have a seat here." They had it set up, a lounge. You had recliners. You had socks on, you had a robe. They the courtyard, the room was looking out into the courtyard. Nobody was in the courtyard, so like people can't see you, but you do see outside. And they have trees, and there's like a little waterfall, and there's soothing sounds. And then the counselor comes and speaks to you, and speaks with you a bit, stays. You don't have to speak, but they're like, "I'll be here for a few minutes if you need to."
Mm-hmm.
I remember that. Okay. um so I had to stay for a bit, and they said, "You leave when you're ready." And I did, and then I took the train back, and I was famished.
Mm-hmm.
Remember taking the train back to my apartment, I was hungry. I remember that. And of course, I couldn't do anything for about 40 days. I do remember feeling a little weird. It was afterwards I felt did I really do the right thing?
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Now you start thinking deep.
Then I started thinking.
Yeah.
And this is what I tell people. This is why I tell you this is a story of redemption because, it came years later. Um the most what I think a lot of people don't know, and what's the worst part is the emotional part afterwards,
Mm-hmm.
right? I want to say it's almost, and I could be wrong, and somebody might probably like, are you crazy? It's almost like postpartum, where you have that weird feeling like you go through these range of emotions, and then all of a sudden you could start crying, and you're like, what the heck am I crying? I mean, that's, so the psychological, nobody tells you about that comes after that. That to me is, and this is why I wanted to share this because nobody shared that with me. Okay. I don't know um if I would have, if they would have told me at that time, if I would have changed my mind.
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, I want to tell you, oh yeah, sure. I don't know. I don't know.
Do you think that part of the postpartum, or the struggle with,
Hmm.
asking yourself, did I do the right thing or the wrong thing, was affected a lot by the influences of society or family? Because
Yeah.
abortion is a stigma. I
Yeah.
always wonder, if the stigma were not there, would women still quarrel that much with it after they've made their decision?
I don't know. I think um I think it's something, and again, this is why, I wanted to share this with you because now you bring up like, I don't know, possibly,
Mhm,
right? Because remember, yo era la niña linda, la buena, que se fue a la universidad, mira que independiente, que si esto y lo otro.
mhm,
So then I tell my aunt afterwards, she calls, she's like, are you okay? And I was like, yeah, Titi, I'm fine. And she says, oye, tomorrow I'm going to take you out to lunch. I said, okay. So she takes me out to lunch. And I start sharing with her a little bit. And I said, but I don't want to talk about it anymore. She says, well, I'm going to talk. I was like, okay. So she starts telling me, about a very close family relative that went through that. Nobody knew. Went through it all by themselves. Only my aunt knew because they were very close.
mhm.
Okay. And she says, it's just amazing. And I was like, what do you mean? That this person? She's like, yeah. And I was I was shocked. I was like, because here's someone that, paints everything this way and that way and is like, yay, you go girl. Ah. And so you're like, I yeah, no wrong, right? And then all of a sudden you find this out and you're like, what?
Mhm.
That that threw me. Along with everything else I was feeling,
Mhm.
that totally threw me for a loop.
So, do you think that helped or injured, or what the decision?
I know that I didn't tell this person right away. Okay. I said I'm not feeling well, the call often. I'm not feeling well. Oh, are you okay? Yeah, no, I just have these really bad cramps and da 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 da. And so I didn't say anything to this person until I had my daughter.
And how long after?
That was like almost, I got married when I was 27. So I had the abortion when I was about mid 25, and I had my daughter when I was 29.
Okay, so there's a few years there in between, and that's how long.
Yeah. That's
Okay.
a lot because I had to process it. I know that I journaled it.
Mhm.
And it was so interesting because the other day I'm a stationary geek. So I have journals and journals, and they're like half written and some are not written. And I found the one that I had written that in. And I was like, oh my gosh, let me read, because there were things that I was like, I forgot,
Mhm.
that I think I forgot. Well, I tore that part out of the journal. And
Mhm.
I was like, oh man, because I had wanted, I've as a result of this, I've decided that my husband, my kids will know everything about me, because I don't want anyone in the family to come later and say, "Oh yeah, you know what Dali did?" You know what I'm saying? Let them hear it from me, so that then later there's no.
Yeah. No
It's like,
chisme en la familia.
exactly. I was like, no, my mom. This is what my mom said, and this is So, but anyway, so I had pushed that. So I journaled it, and I actually married my boyfriend, who's now my husband.
Mhm.
We had a rough time for a few months.
I can
For
imagine.
a few months
Yeah,
after,
especially how he was feeling about it, right?
yeah, yeah, and we kind of like glossed over it and
Mhm.
then moved on. And then we had some other issues in going on. Then we got married and we moved to Miami. And you know, ay, la nena se casa, mira qué linda, que si esto, si lo otro, right? So, and it's so funny because when I put on my white dress, my aunt's like, I was like, shut up, right? Because the whole thing, like, you got to get dressed in white, que si esto. So, we moved to Miami, and I found out I was pregnant with my daughter. And that for me was, oh, God still loves me,
Mm.
right? Because I felt I had done this, because I started going to church, because I actually was, my grandfather was a pastor, right? So when I was little, I went to church.
Mhm.
That's the other thing,
Yeah.
right? You
With
know,
that religious influence and being like la granddaughter del pastor de que se embarazó. Oh,
exactly. That was another thing. So then I started going to church. And when I found out I was pregnant, that was like another flood of emotions, because then I'm thinking like, oh God, you love me, you've forgiven me, right? And so that's then where I told my mom and I told my family that I'm pregnant, and they're like, oh my gosh, you're pregnant. They thought it was, well, I told them on April 1st, and they thought I was joking, and I was like, so, but then some time passed, and they were so happy. They're so happy. Mira, we're gonna be grandparents. And of course, then I start having, like this thing in my head, like, so sometime later, then I talked with I saw this family member, and they're like, well, that's none of your business. How do you know that? And I said, well, Titi said, well, that was none of her goddamn business to tell you. I was like, oh,
mhm.
okay. Up to today, this family member, I had told them when I went to therapy, and I said, you might want to go too. And they're like, no, I don't need to do that. I'm good. I already came clean with God. I'm good. I said, okay. So I freely talk about it because, like I said, I don't want anybody to say, like, try to hold this over me. But I share the story because I know there's a lot of women that have been afraid to talk about this. And when I've shared it with them, like, oh my God, me too.
Mm-hmm.
I went through that,
Yeah.
and I didn't think I would ever, they pulled me aside and said, listen, I also had one. I was like, really? And then they start unloading, and I share with them how is it that then I come to the healing, which is, what was it? So I had my daughter, and then I had my son. They're like 3 years
Mm-hmm.
apart. And so I was going to this church, and they had offered counseling, abortion counseling. Mind you, I had not really had any counseling. I kind of like,
Wow, this is fascinating. You are the first person who tells me that a church offered abortion counseling.
mm-hmm,
That is unheard of to me. I'm sure that
no,
now that's more available, but this is so important for you to mention, especially for people watching who need to speak to someone.
mm-hmm.
So
It
how was your experience with that group, the counseling?
it was, what the funny thing is, because at this church I was a leader in the women's group, and they had talked about this, and I said I want to go, and they're like, really? And so I shared a little bit why I wanted to be part of this group, and they said, oh, okay. But from what I understand, they had like a huge list of people that were ready to go, and they said, well, we're glad you're here because a lot of women that are on, they never showed me the list.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of the women that are on the list are in your women's group, or they're connected with you in some way. And a lot of them serve with you, because I served in different ministries. I served in the children's ministry, the hospitality ministry, so then the bad thing is I'm like, is she one? I had to catch myself, like, stop it, stop it, stop it. We're like, ooh, did this girl, right? So I had to like, stop, don't do that. Be supportive. So anyway, the first day, it was me. And this was a church, and this was a church that had campuses across the nation.
Okay.
Okay. So the main campus was in Texas. All right. So it was me, another lady here, um, and one of the church leaders, because they needed to have, I guess, for integrity and fidelity, one of the pastor's wives, she was there just to serve as a intermediary or so forth. So on the other campus there was only one other lady, and so it was a total of 3 people, of a list where there's like almost 20 people.
Mm-hmm. Only three showed up.
Only 3 showed up, and we Skyped. This was like before Zoom. So on Saturdays we would meet, and we shared what had happened and so forth. And the lady that was at this campus in Miami, we've been close friends ever since, even though she moved up. I believe she's in Maryland or Virginia. um I mean, we shared our story. It was very painful process, because now the physical is done, right? It's healed. Ya eso se fue,
Mm-hmm.
right? It's the emotional, it's your psyche, it's what nobody sees.
Mm-hmm.
And that is the problem for me, and I think for a lot of women, that emotional baggage. ¿Qué dirán? Right? Um, and so, we went through a lot of scriptures, the whole process of being forgiven, the redemption, um, bringing your child, your aborted child, back into the family circle, in the sense that, if I remember it clearly, this is a spirit that has no claim, right? I mean, because we're spirits, basically. This is our, right,
Flesh
right, that's it. When we die, this is what's left. The spirit has gone,
tone.
right? So the whole thing of bringing this spirit back to the family, right? It's in have, the baby's in heaven, but bring this back, the spirit back into your family. And so part of the thing is, what do you feel your baby? Was it male or female? And I thought it was a male. I had the strong, because I had dreams. And I'm thinking, because that then I didn't realize that when I was pregnant, I thought I was dreaming of a boy, but it was a girl. But the whole time I'm thinking, and so as we went through this whole process, I mean, talk about onion, you're peeling off layers and layers. Talk about vulnerability,
Yeah.
right? And then as I'm going through this, there's actually a separate, also, if men want to,
Oh,
right?
that's really good. Yeah.
Yeah. But my husband was like, no, I'm not going to do that. But the interesting thing is that as I was going through it and I was sharing with him, he was also going through it.
Mm-hmm.
And there were moments that he was just like, I can't. And then if I'm vulnerable, and so it was really a turning point for us. It was if I mean, we had to go through a lot of rehashing of issues. Okay. And understanding for him how he felt embarrassed.
Mm.
He says, I've never told my sisters, you
Mm-hmm.
know I've told my sisters you had a miscarriage,
Oh, okay.
right? And so, respecting that, and like, okay, that building that all up, letting it out and building back. I mean, it was, I think, one of the hardest things emotionally that I had to go through vicariously him, even though he wasn't there, and I'm sharing with him, and he's like, and then he's also, you know we're here going through this whole process. And this is why I say, I mean, nobody talks about that
Mm-hmm.
emotional part. And so as we go through this, and I reclaim we reclaim our son, we gave him his name,
Mm-hmm.
Diego Israel, and we shared with the kids, and for them they were like, really? Oh, and my daughter got happy. She's like, I have a big brother. you know, she was little, but he's part of our family now,
Mm-hmm.
right? So that whole redemption, that whole forgiveness, that whole bringing you back to wholeness, that was key. And like I say, this is something people don't talk about. They just talk about the physical.
Yeah.
The physical, eso se sana.
Mm-hmm. Rápido comparado a.
Eso, right, exactly. I mean, how many kids you have, girl?
Yeah, I have two.
Two?
And
And
yeah,
your body, you're good, right? So you forgot the pain from the first one, and then you had the second.
yeah. You're like, oh yeah, this is what. Why am I doing this again?
Exactly, exactly. And and this is where I'm at. And this might be, and this is, I'll be very honest with you, this was the kind of the part I was a little bit hesitant about.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so I've gone through an abortion, survived to tell about it, be healed physically and emotionally, to then feel confident to talk to you and share this with you. All that is, I am still a pro choice. I think women need to have the choice. Now, if you tell me you want to have an abortion, I will try to talk you out of it. Honestly, I was like, and the reason why I will talk you out of it is because I don't want you to have this emotional baggage. Okay. Oh, you can adopt. I didn't want to. I didn't want to give up my child for adoption because I had seen those stories and I was like, I don't want to go through that.
Mm-hmm.
Right. I don't want to give up, because then I know my head. we'll be going over like, where's this child? Where's this child?
Yeah.
And that's another can of worms. You know, you have to, and I did not want to do that. And I figured this was the quickest, and eso se resolvía rápido. I didn't have to go through 9 months. Nobody was going to know. And so I tell people, I said, yes, you have the right to choose whatever you want to do with your body, good or bad.
Absolutely.
But you know, there are consequences.
Yep.
And
Yep.
I don't want, and you know, nobody talks about the emotional. And I don't think it should be used as a contraception, really.
No, definitely not. But you're right.
Yeah.
And I think that's the problem because people don't talk about the emotional. A lot of people go through that experience alone, per se,
Mm-hmm.
not knowing what to expect.
Yep.
But the reason we don't talk about it is because of the backlash.
Right.
El miedo de que, oh my gosh, I'm gonna get trolled, or my family's gonna disown me, or I'm not gonna be
Mm-hmm.
that person for to them anymore.
Right.
So I'm absolutely just grateful that you are being so honest and that you have clarified to people that you are pro-choice. And I'll tell you why. A lot of people think, oh, so women who got an abortion and later might regret it, they're against abortion now. Or maybe if they had, they were okay, just like you were okay at the moment, and then later all the emotional stuff came, they would expect you to be, oh no, I'm against it.
Right.
But
Right.
that's not your case. You still respect the fact that women should have
I,
that
oh,
option,
yes.
but also
Exactly.
recognize it is not an easy decision that will have
It's not.
some negative ramifications, whether you do it or you don't.
Mm-hmm. It's really one of those things. But what I want to offer is also there is redemption. This is then where you need to seek counseling. You need to seek therapy. And unfortunately, it makes you very vulnerable. Makes you very vulnerable, where almost to the point of shame. And I think, you know, sometimes that then we have depression.
Yeah.
And I think when we live in the light, it, yes, it makes us vulnerable, but it eases a lot. And then you can walk on with your head up, right? Because, and you know, my husband and I, we've had our experiences, you know, together and apart, whatever, you know, before each other and whatever. But we've always been honest with our kids because we never wanted to have somebody else tell our story to our kids.
Right.
And that was one of the key things that I wanted to share with my kids. And it's so interesting. I was talking with my son the other day and I said, what do you think about? He says, I don't know, mom. I mean, you've taught me women should have whatever choice they want to make. I I really wouldn't want her to have an abortion, but then it's her choice. And I
Yeah.
said, yes, it's her choice, Papa. And if you decide to stay with her, realize that it's an emotional baggage for both.
Yeah.
And he's like, wow. You know, nobody ever told me that.
And
So,
and nobody really wants to have an abortion.
right.
Like, that's a stereotype that like some things that I want to point out. You said
Hmm.
Planned Parenthood is where you went, and they offer other services, and that's one misconception that I always try to focus on for people to know.
Hmm.
Abortion services are one of the very, very few
Oh,
services that they offer.
yeah.
They even offer services for men to get tested for prostate cancer and all kinds of things.
Hmm. And
The
for
other,
VGs, any venereal diseases, you need, I mean, there's so much.
yeah.
There's so much.
The other thing that you mentioned is that you felt warm. So that stereotype of being in a dungeon basement where everything's cold and you're alone, and it's like this horrible situation. No, they
I
were,
didn't have that
yeah,
experience.
they
That's,
were,
yeah.
they were sensitive to you. They knew that it was a very, very sensitive situation, and they tried to make you feel as comfortable as possible. And they did
Yep.
try to tell you, "Are you sure?"
Up to the last,
Yeah.
up to the last moment where I'm getting into, I tell people up to the last moment that I'm putting on the gown. Are
Mhm.
you sure?
Yeah. And then
And I'm
afterwards,
getting up on the table. Are you sure? Oh, okay.
you mentioned they had you sit down there for a while until you were ready. So everything's about you and your decision. And then they provided the opportunity for a counselor to sit there for a little bit to see if you'd warm up to wanting to talk. And I'm sure even after the counselor left the area, you could have asked for that counselor to
Yeah.
return and speak to you. So
Right.
that's what I want to make sure that people understand. This is straight coming from you. It's not that I went and like read some story that could be or true or not
Right.
true.
Right.
So
Right.
thank you
Exactly.
so much for sharing.
No, and thank you for allowing me to do this. Like I've said, and I think I told you in the DMs, I had shared this story with, other people more one on one. And I'm at the point in my life that I have stories that I want to share, and because I don't know who could benefit
Mhm.
from it.
And thank you also for mentioning how you approached it with your family when you came out and said, "Hey, this is what happened." Not only with your family, your titi and the other person that
Mhm.
you spoke to, but also you and your husband. You admitted it did create some problems, but you
Yeah.
worked it through, and then you took control of your own story, which is very admirable, and it takes so much courage. And I'm so proud of you for doing that.
Well, thank you,
To your
Mama.
family, you spoke to your kids so that you're not that story in the family spinning around behind your back.
Hmm.
And it stigmatizes the family, which is horrible that your own family ends up doing, but it's all because we don't talk publicly about these sensitive
Yeah.
issues, and we don't educate ourselves. And again, um, it's something that should be spoken about so that we stop looking at people like they're horrible or not godly. Luz, thank you a million times. Thank you for sharing this story. I know for a fact that this is going to help somebody. Do you have any last words for anybody either about to have to take that decision or who has already taken that decision?
One, you're not alone. Two, seek counseling, even if you have to do it by yourself, but get help.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Luz. You're amazing.
Thank you, Mama. Thank you so much.